Good morning, everybody. It's Monday morning. Hope you had a fantastic weekend, and I hope you're in for a really tremendous week. I have a great sunrise behind me. I hope that you're able to enjoy that with me today. We're continuing our subject of looking at the different tests that God takes people through over the course of their lives. We've been working our way through the book of Genesis, and we find ourselves today in the book of Genesis chapter 25. It's the story of Isaac, as he had been Abraham's son. And not much is spoken about Isaac, but we know a few things about him. We know that he married a lady called Rebecca. We know that he had a lot of money. He became an incredibly wealthy man. But his real claim to fame was that he had two sons. And these two sons, they were twins, and they were completely different. You wouldn't know, they were like oil and water. They were like chalk and cheese. They were like completely different kind of people. The first child that emerged from the womb was Esau, and he was rough and ready and red, and he was the hunter. He was the one who was out there in his outdoors, and Isaac loved this young man. He really enjoyed him as a person. And then the other little guy who came out was a guy by the name, they called him Jacob, and he was the smooth, and he was the slimy, slithery little one, and he came out holding onto the ankle of his brother. And Jacob means the name grabber. Now this became prophetically incredibly true, because Jacob grabbed something from Esau. One day Esau, we read, had been out into the bush, and he'd been hunting, and he'd not shot anything, he'd not killed anything, and he came back and he was down. And his brother had been in the kitchen with mom and had made a beautiful stew, and as he came in, the aroma of the stew went up his nostrils, and he was so hungry. He made a stupid declaration to Jacob. Esau said to Jacob, "Jacob, if you give me that stew for me to eat to satisfy my immediate need, man, I'll give you anything you want. I'll even give you my birthright." Now, the birthright in those days was the inheritance, and most of it was given to the firstborn son, who was Esau. Jacob thought, here's my opportunity to grab what I want. So he sold his stew to Esau and received the birthright. Before Isaac died, he gave to Jacob the birthright that should have been given to Esau. Now, in this particular story, there lies a great lesson for, I believe, all of us today. We have a Heavenly Father. It's a beautiful parallel. He too is unbelievably wealthy, if that's the right word to use. And we too, like Esau, sometimes we trade our birthright for something far less. Because we need to pass the test of desiring the immediate rather than being willing to wait for this thing. And we look at some of the issues that we face, so we want immediate gratification because we live in an immediate world. We have instant coffee, we have instant knowledge on the Google thing, we have so much stuff that is immediate in mind, because that's what advertising says we need. We need stuff, and we need it now. And so we more now than ever have bred up this kind of mindset. I want it, and I want it now. And it's not new, it's always been there. Jacob grabbed his brother's birthright. Now, it was a strange thing, because God was able to use that for his purpose. But by human nature, there is a challenge that faces each one of us today. We could very well sell our blessing of God, the birthright of the inheritance of his peace and his presence and his power here on earth. We could sell that for a cheap thrill. We could sell that for an illicit relationship. We could sell that for a dirty habit. We could sell that for some destructive way of living or thinking. I want us to think about this today, to say, you know what? We have an incredibly wealthy Heavenly Father, a God who has promised us great blessing, but when we sell our birthright, we lose the blessing. When we sell our relationship with God for something that is an immediate gratification thing, instead of saying, God, in your time. You know that chapter in Proverbs where it says, there is a time for everything under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to love and a time to hate, a time to build and a time to break. There is a time for everything under heaven. And I love the way it ends. It says, and all things are beautiful in his time, not yours. So don't seek after immediate gratification. Let's seek after God. I guess Moses was like this in the wilderness. You know, Moses' story takes up just a few pages in our Bible. And yet all through those 120 years of his life, Moses was up and down all the time, and his entire life is compressed into this little book. There were many highs and many lows. The highs were fantastic, but most of the time, you know, Moses, he was just plodding through the wilderness. There were no great, there were a few highs, I know that, and they were great, they were wonderful, but in the main, he never looked for a shortcut to spirituality. He knew that it was a long haul of discipline and passion to follow God and to obey Him in all details. Christian life is a great life. I want to tell you, I recommend it completely. It's awesome. But there is so much discipline and looking to the future and trusting God for the immediate, knowing that in His time, He will make all things good. I hope you could work this thing out in the context of your life today. But in the meanwhile, have a great day. Cheers, folks.